It started off like any other quiet afternoon in the suburbs: blue skies, trimmed lawns, and the occasional hum of a lawnmower in the distance. But that calm didn't last long. Out of nowhere, two self-proclaimed HOA cops in security vests pulled over a guy riding a dirt bike near the edge of the neighborhood. No sirens, no real authority, just clipboards, attitude, and walkie-talkies that didn't even seem to be on. They claimed the bike was unauthorized for community use and began grilling the rider right there on the street. At first glance, it seemed like a simple misunderstanding, but the tone quickly shifted. The rider wasn't just any random teen, cutting through on his way home. He didn't argue. He didn't panic. He just stood there calmly, letting them talk, giving short answers, but keeping an eye on the road behind them like he was expecting something. And within minutes, that something came. First, the low rumble, then the unmistakable sound of multiple engines. 15, maybe 20, Humvees rolled up, military style, tires kicking up dust. Soldiers in full gear stepped out with precision, not a moment wasted. And leading them? A U.S. Army captain with sharp eyes and zero patience. The fake HOA cops suddenly realized they hadn't just stopped the wrong bike. They'd messed with someone they should have never laid hands on. What happened next had the whole neighborhood talking for days. Some say it was a drill gone wrong. Others say it was a message. But no one could forget the look on those fake officers' faces when the captain stepped forward and asked one simple question: "Is there a problem here?" That moment changed everything. But what was really going on beneath the surface? Why was the military involved? And who was that rider, really? "Stay tuned," the fake HOA cops stammered, suddenly unsure of themselves. They looked from the rider to the soldiers, then back at each other like they were hoping this was all some weird coincidence. But it wasn't. The captain didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone made the entire street go quiet. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, phones recording from front porches, nobody sure if they were watching a sting operation or the start of something much bigger. The rider, still calm, didn't say a word. He just stepped aside and let the captain handle it. That's when people started to notice things they hadn't before, like the special insignia on the rider's jacket or the gear strapped to the side of the bike that didn't look store-bought. It became clear this wasn't just a kid out for a joyride. There was something official, maybe even classified, about him. Rumors started swirling fast. Some said he was a military courier on a test route. Others thought he might be undercover. But what nobody could figure out was how the fake HOA officers had known to stop that bike, or if they had just gotten way too confident playing pretend authority. The captain asked for their IDs, and that's when the real tension kicked in. One of the fake officers hesitated a beat too long. The other one tried to explain that they were volunteer safety coordinators for the community, but the soldiers weren't buying it. Their gear, their stance, their focus. It was clear they were there for something very specific, and this traffic stop had gotten in the way. One of the Humvees opened, and two men in suits stepped out. No uniforms, just dark shades and earpieces. They weren't with the army. And the moment they approached the rider, even the captain gave a small nod. Something much deeper was going on. The two men in suits didn't waste time. One of them leaned in and whispered something to the rider. Whatever he said made the rider finally react. Just a slight nod, nothing dramatic, but enough to signal that things were shifting behind the scenes. The captain stepped back respectfully, like he understood his role had just changed. The soldiers, still alert, adjusted their stance. They weren't standing down, but they were waiting. Meanwhile, the fake HOA cops stood frozen. One tried to speak up, saying they were just trying to keep the neighborhood safe, but his voice cracked mid-sentence. The taller man in the team-up suit finally turned to them and asked a calm but chilling question. "Did someone tell you to stop that bike, or was this your own idea?" Neither answered, but their silence was louder than words. Across the street, An older woman in a bathrobe was still filming from her porch. Her video would later go viral. Millions of views, endless theories. Some people thought the rider was transporting something critical. Others believed he was being followed and the fake officers weren't fake at all, but decoys, placed by someone else entirely. Back near the Humvees, quiet conversations started happening. The rider was now talking to the suited men in low tones, glancing occasionally at the fake officers. One of the soldiers approached the bike, inspecting it with careful precision. What he found, nobody said aloud, but he called another soldier over right away. That detail didn't go unnoticed. Then, something strange happened. A white SUV parked at the end of the block, engine still running. No one got out. No plates. It just sat there, idle. The suited men looked toward it. The rider's eyes narrowed, and the captain gave a subtle hand signal. Everything was building toward something, and nobody in that neighborhood was ready for what was coming next. The white SUV still hadn't moved. Its windows were tinted, and even from a distance, everyone could feel that whoever was inside wasn't there by accident. One of the suited men subtly tapped his earpiece, muttering something too low to catch. Instantly, 2 soldiers peeled off and began moving, calm but direct, toward the vehicle. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. The fake HOA cops were now visibly sweating. One of them took a shaky step backward, mumbling something about calling his supervisor, but the captain raised a hand and said, "Stay right where you are." It wasn't a threat, just a command that didn't leave room for argument. The other fake officer kept glancing at the SUV like he recognized it. That was the moment when everything started to unravel. The rider stepped toward the soldiers inspecting his bike and quietly handed over a small, flat object. Looked like a hard drive or encrypted device. Whatever it was, it changed the energy. Fast. One of the soldiers looked at the screen of a secure tablet and nodded. Something checked out, but instead of relaxing, the team grew even more alert. That's when the SUV door finally opened. Slowly, a man stepped out. Not in uniform, not in a suit, just a plain black jacket, jeans, and sunglasses. But the way he carried himself, how everyone instantly turned their attention to him. This was someone important, someone the soldiers hadn't expected. The rider locked eyes with the man in black, and for a long second, neither of them moved. Then the suited man beside the rider leaned in and said, "That's not supposed to be him." Now even the captain looked uncertain. The man from the SUV took a few steps forward and said just 4 words. "You weren't supposed to see." And just like that, everything, the soldiers, the rider, the fake HOA cops, even the neighborhood, was caught in something way bigger than anyone had guessed. The moment those words left the man's mouth, "You weren't supposed to see," everything shifted. The soldiers tightened formation without being told. The rider didn't flinch, but his jaw clenched just enough to notice. Even the suited agents looked rattled, their eyes darting between each other like they had just realized something wasn't adding up. The calm control that had held the scene together up until now cracked, just a little. Then, without warning, the man in black reached into his jacket. Instantly, rifles were raised, fingers hovered near triggers, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a thin metal case, no markings, just sleek and cold. He held it up in plain view and said, "He's carrying the wrong drive. That one's a decoy." The suited agent turned to the rider, confused. "You didn't switch it?" The rider didn't answer. He just stared at the man in black with something between suspicion and recognition. There was history there. Not just official business, but something personal. The kind of history that doesn't come up in reports or files. That's when the second twist hit. The captain's radio crackled alive. A scrambled voice full of static barely came through. "Eyes in the air. Extraction blocked. Secondary unit compromised." The captain's expression darkened. Whatever mission this had started as It wasn't in their hands anymore. From Mo? The rooftops, subtle movements were suddenly visible. Not soldiers, not police, no uniforms at all. Shadows. Observers. Watching everything. The man in black turned his head slightly, like he'd known they were there the entire time. "They're not with us," he said calmly, "and they're not here for the drive." Now nobody knew who to trust. The fake HOA cops? Shaking and silent. The soldiers? On edge. The rider? Still holding something they all wanted, decoy or not. And just like that, this wasn't just about a fake traffic stop or a stolen device anymore. It was about who had set the trap, and who it was really meant for. The tension hit a breaking point. The man in black took a step closer, and though rifles stayed raised, no one pulled the trigger. The rider finally spoke for the first time in minutes. "You always said you'd stay in the shadows," he said, voice low. "So why show up now?" The man in black gave a dry smile. "Because the people watching us, on those rooftops, aren't just watching anymore. They're here to clean up." The captain quickly barked into his radio, calling for perimeter lockdown. But it was too late. A small drone zipped overhead, barely visible, before exploding midair in a silent flash. No sound, just light. Everyone flinched, blinded for half a second. And in that moment, the metal case the man in black had been holding vanished. Gone. Snatched or taken. No one saw who had it. Chaos broke loose. The shadows on the rooftops began to retreat, not engaging but clearly satisfied. The soldiers regrouped around the rider, forming a protective wall. The man in black didn't move. He just stood there like he'd expected it all to go this way. One of the suited agents shouted, "He was never after the drive. He wanted the tracker inside it." And that's when it hit everyone. The drive was a decoy, yes, but it had been bait, designed to lead someone straight to a hidden target. And now that tracker was gone. The rider turned to the captain and handed him a second device. Much smaller, hidden under his sleeve. "This is the real one. But they know now. They'll come again." The man in black simply nodded and walked. Back to the SUV. No one stopped him. As the convoy pulled away, the neighborhood slowly returned to silence. But nothing would ever feel normal again. Then came the twist. Days later, surveillance footage from that street disappeared from every local cloud backup, security cams, phone recordings, even live streams, gone without a trace. Except for one clip, the old woman in the bathrobe. Her video reappeared online, but it showed something different. The rider had handed 2 identical drives. Only one was ever recovered. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood slowly slipped back into its routine. Dog walkers, sprinklers, porch gossip. But under the surface, nothing felt the same. People spoke in hushed tones about what they'd seen. That day, fake HOA cops, military Humvees, the mysterious rider, and the man in black who vanished like a ghost. Even the old woman in the bathrobe, now somewhat of a local celebrity, kept repeating one strange thing. There were 2 drives. I saw him hand over 2. Officials came through days later, offering vague explanations about a training, exercise. But nobody believed that. Not after the soldiers, not after the sudden camera wipe, and definitely not after the man in the black jacket. Some say he worked for an agency that doesn't exist on paper. Others believe the entire thing was a cover-up for a bigger mission. As for the rider, he disappeared just as quickly as he arrived. No one saw him again, but the captain left behind a single statement before his unit rolled out. "Whatever you think happened here, you only saw the surface." The fake HOA cops were quietly removed from the community. Rumors spread that they were part of a setup meant to intercept the rider at just the right moment. Whether they knew the full scope or were just pawns, no one could say for sure. But after that day, no one ever tried playing fake authority again. In the end, the drive that was recovered was turned over to military custody. The second one? Still missing. Maybe hidden. Maybe stolen. And maybe never meant to be found. What really happened on that suburban street may never be fully known. But one thing's for sure. When you stop the wrong bike, you might trigger something far bigger than your neighborhood.